Welcome to episode 272 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my guest co-host, JeanHeyd.
Hey,
JeanHeyd, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty great. Excited to guest co-host. It's the first time I've done something like this. I'm kind of excited and happy to have our two guests on for this.
Yeah, should be fun. And for listeners who are wondering where Jason is, he will be back next week, but he was unavailable this week. And over the past few years, Jason's been doing more and more training and international travel, and we've always sometimes had difficulty juggling around that schedule. Sometimes we might record 2 episodes in a week beforehand, or try to work with his schedule when he is international and record interviews then. And sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes we missed episodes in the past because of it. So the two of us discussed a while ago that it might be a good idea to, instead of working around that sometimes difficult schedule, to just be able to have alternative or guest co-hosts. And JeanHeyd, you were one of the first people we thought of, and it's great to have you on in Jason's shoes this week.
Yeah, I hope I can fill them. That's for sure.
I'm sure you will. Okay, well, at the top of every episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, I got this tweet from Pixie Mix saying, "Hi there, I'm fairly new to the podcast and just getting up to date with your episodes. Loved your more recent one with Teresa Johnson. I love the atmosphere of the show so far and the higher level of it being for CPP programmers as opposed to beginners. Please keep it up through tough times. You've given me a good new morning podcast." So yeah, thanks for the great work, the great words. And yeah, it was really fun talking to Teresa last week about ThinLTL. Cool. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube. Joining us today is Aaron Ballman. Aaron has been a professional software developer for just under 20 years, most of which has been spent working on compilers of some sort. He currently works as a senior staff compiler engineer at Intel, and most of his compiler experience is from working on Clang. Aaron is the code owner for a few things in the Clang community, attributes and Clang query, and primarily focuses on the compiler front end. He's been a member of the C++ committee for about 7.5 years, C committee for a little over 4 years. He has a personal interest in getting involved in committee work around security and safety. He wants to find ways to make it harder for programmers to write bugs in the first place and make it easier for tools to tell programmers about the bugs they've written. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. And also joining us today is Peter Brett. Peter is currently based in Edinburgh, where he has been working on electronics design automation software since 2006. He spent several years of his free time as the maintainer of the open source GPL electronics design automation schematic editor, and carried that experience over when he joined Cadence Design Systems in 2017 to work on the schematic editor component of Virtuoso, their flagship custom integrated circuit design suite. Peter learned to program in C in 2004, picked up C++ in 2013, and started contributing to C++ standardization in 2019. He is currently the assistant chair of SG16, the Unicode and text processing study group. Peter, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me to join you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So we got a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, both of you, and then we'll start talking more about the work you've been up to in C++ committee, okay?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Okay. So this first one is a Struct layout visual C++ extension. And I saw this on Twitter over the last week a lot, JeanHeyd. This is a pretty neat little tool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing. Being able to kind of visually see, all of the alignment that you get out of a certain structure, where the V table is and things like that, or where the V table pointer is, and where the base class is located, where the actual members are, and how big they are in relation to one another. And also it shows the really cool thing about it is that instead of just kind of packing everything in one list of things, it actually leaves empty space, and so you can see gray space where you can visualize the empty padding bytes that are used, right? So if you move around members, you can see that being played with, and and the changes of where those things are and how well you can pack stuff together. So it's really cool, and it makes it a lot more accessible because it's like visual, and so you can kind of, play around with it a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier to play around these things and kind of immediately get that feedback of how it is, rather than kind of like trying to, do a bunch of, std outs or print tabs to figure out where the struct is located and the offsets and using offset of, and then a bunch of other stuff, so this is pretty cool.
Yeah, and just for our listeners who, if you go and click on this link, you'll see this little animated GIF, which is really cool. But you just right-click in Visual Studio when you're looking at a structure or class, and you can choose this option from the extension to, get a visual struct layout, and you get this really nice, broken apart, kind of color-coded graph of the alignment. It's really, really neat.
I would use this so much if I wasn't an Emacs addict.
Yeah.
But I think when I was looking at this and thinking, quite often the order of the member variables in my classes in C++ is determined by the order of initialization. And I can't actually reorder them even if there are huge gaps in the class layout. And I was thinking about that and what we could do to improve that in the future. That's what came to mind when I was looking at this myself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I really liked it as well. I like the fact that it was in both Visual Studio and VS Code, so you can use it kind of in different editors with the same user experience. But I personally, I just love visualization tools like this because I'm more of a visual person, and so it does a great job of showing me where my gaps are. But I did find a couple of small problems with it. I noticed, for instance, that if you have a templated structure, it won't actually show you the fields in the structure because it doesn't know about the instantiations. And so I'm hopeful that as they get feedback, this will continue to improve. But I already think it's a super useful tool, and I'm really glad that I was found it on Twitter, basically.
Yeah, I know with kind of, regular Visual Studio, they have a fairly new feature where you can like give a default type to a templated class. So maybe they could do something like that where you give a type to this visual layout tool, and it'll give you a visual layout based on that type. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd also mentioned that perhaps it might make sense to allow you to inspect the type of a variable, so you know the concrete type of the instantiation at that point.
Right.
That would be really useful. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Next article we have is from Vector of Bool's blog, and this is Fun with Concepts. Do you even lift bool? And I thought this was a great article, JeanHeyd. They go into the weakness of bool and its problems with implicit conversion. Pointers implicitly converting to boolean, and at the end they give an alternative boolean type that would avoid all those problems.
Yeah, it's really I kind of like it because it is a very good alternative to bool, but I think there are some other things that you kind of get out of this with that probably require a little bit less work than make your own like struct boolean.
Right.
And that's probably because it's just a little bit better to have like named things instead. Like when you pass things like true and false to these to constructors or function calls, like if you have just one, it might make sense. But when you get to 2 or 3 or it's 1, but it's interleaved in a bunch of other members or a bunch of other different parameters, it becomes a little bit difficult to kind of sort through whether or not like what that's actually supposed to mean. So a lot of people kind of go with the nums here, where they use an enumeration and then give it a name. But just on its face, if you're just using Boolean values, like the whole struct Boolean that they define here is actually super duper useful. There's another technique also that you can use to kind of prevent just like implicit conversions, which I think you mentioned at the very end of the article, where you use that the same asterisk or an identity T trick, where you have a template. You use a templated type that basically just resolves the same type you pass in. So it's like identity, it's like same as bool or identity T of bool. And basically what that does is that prevents like the different kinds of template instantiations and conversions from triggering automatically. And it prevents, a couple of deductions like that when you're in template context. So that also helps a little bit too. That's it's also kind of helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I missed that last part about the same as trick.
Yeah, the same as trick is more of employing a concept to prevent the conversion from kicking in. So they use same as bool auto b, and that gives you like the a parameter that is switched to be basically Boolean types only.
Right.
But it's the other kind of lower tech non-CS+20 non-concept version is to just use like an identity T trick to prevent some amount of implicit catching and decay and stuff like that. So that's, there's two different ways to do it. I prefer the concepts version because it's a lot cleaner and it's a lot easier to read. But, other people, work on CS+17, they don't have concepts, or, work in CS+11 or, God forbid, CS+03, and so they have to do some different things to make it work out, I think. Yeah.
Right. Aaron or Peter, anything you wanted to add to this article?
I appreciated the fact that it was a nice demonstration of how to what the power is in some of the new declarative syntax in C++. Things like having conditionally explicit constructors and that sort of stuff. It was, I like seeing more emphasis on those sorts of safety aspects where the C++ committee way back in the day kind of got the defaults a little bit wrong, perhaps. And so this gives users a path forwards to writing a little bit more type-safe code with less implicit conversions. So I thought it was great. I did think it was really interesting. There was just a tiny little note in there about how concepts are supposed to make error messages so much easier to read, and the author did not find that to be the case. And I keep hearing that over and over again, and as a compiler writer, it makes me sad because that was one of the things that we were really hoping was going to improve with concepts. And so I'm hopeful that we'll continue to improve the compiler technology to kind of reduce the amount of template instantiation-ness of concepts if we can.
Right.
I was going to mention all of the stuff that Aaron just mentioned, but one additional thing is that this thing about language-defined conversions taking priority over user-defined conversions. And one of those language-defined conversions that causes me a lot of grief is array to pointer decay. And even with concepts, I really struggle to find a new way around that. Who knows, in 2023 or 2024, we might get a C++20 compiler to use on our product, and I might be able to do some more in-depth experiments then. But yeah, I really found that theme of, slight maybe problems that have built up in the standard over time, where sort of a number of sensible decisions have sort of added up to something we're not totally happy about. Really was an interesting sort of second narrative to this article that I enjoyed.
Yeah. Right. Okay, and then this last article we have, JeanHeyd, it's great you're here this week. It's kind of ironic because when we had Jens Veller on a couple weeks ago, we talked about your video, the community, and he mentioned at the time that he was planning on writing his own blog post on the subject, and he has since written that blog post, and he's sharing some of his own thoughts here, and now we have you here to talk about it.
Yes, I guess that's pretty lucky. But yeah, so his blog post kind of goes through like kind of a more like specific to meeting C++ look at like the community and what they can do, and the kind of the challenges that meeting C++ faces. I also found, particularly in the article, I found the point about like data collection very interesting. In the article, I believe he's like as a German, like I'm uncomfortable having detailed tracking on this kind of data because So I don't have it, right? That's why he said he didn't have it. And that kind of makes sense because historically in Europe and other places, and in other places around Europe, a lot of what got a lot of minority groups and other ethnic groups in trouble is that when they were invaded or whenever the country wanted to look inward, they had very detailed information about what ethnicity a person was and what culture they affiliate with, what religion they affiliate with. And
Right.
so that made it so that it was very easy and effective in deporting people, putting people in camps, getting them out of their country, attacking them, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of the, this happens in France and other places, right, where they kind of outlaw collecting some of that data, like on race or ethnicity and things like that, because they're afraid of that. If they have that kind of detailed information again, then, somebody goes off the rocker, with France or Germany or Austria or whatever,
Being
somebody
misused
could do that
horribly.
again. Yeah. So that was a very interesting point, and it kind of squared with what I was doing. So I found a lot of good data on ethnicity and things like that in Asia and in the United States and some of the South American countries as well. But where it kind of fell off was in Europe, and that's kind of because of that culture of being careful and not snacking that kind of information. There's still at least some good data there around women and other kinds of splits in the community. But a lot of people again, a lot of the culture around Europe is not tracking the data to begin with because they're just that fear of what would happen if this got into the wrong hands and things like that. And that's it's a very valid concern, and being able to properly convince yourself that you can collect this data and properly anonymize it so that something like that wouldn't happen is a very tall order. Especially, if you're a single person managing a lot of this stuff. So, I found that point, I think, very, very interesting. And it gave me a lot to reflect on for some of these conferences like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Aaron, Peter, you have any thoughts you want to add on this one?
So this made me think about, this article made me think again back to JeanHeyd's excellent video. And I was thinking that really there is a very, very small number of, real racists and misogynists and things in our community. But I think what there is a lot of is I think people who don't want to need to worry about these things as things that need to be dealt with within our community. Right? There's not so much, the problem for me is not so much the actual racists, it's the people who want to be free from thinking about that as a problem that people who come to our community have to deal with. And for me, that really, when I was reading through, the comments in all of the different forums, that was what I really saw. That was the first thought. And the second thought was that one thing that I struggle with is getting my colleagues from underrepresented groups to take part in, events in our community. And often even when, even the hurdle of being confronted by a blank sheet of paper for a call for papers is very difficult for some of these people from those groups. And I don't really know how we can tackle that. Something we need to think about as meeting organisers and as sort of professionals within the community is how we can address that barrier to entry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things Jens mentioned was it's just great to have, someone that you can look at who looks like you as a role model, speaking at these conferences and things like that. And the more of those role models we have, hopefully the easier it becomes for more people of various minorities to kind of join the community and feel like they can be a part of it. So hopefully that just continues to happen. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So normally on a normal year over the past few years of CppCast, we do several post ISO meeting kind of trip report episodes. Usually we'll grab someone who was at the meeting and talk about what type of news occurred there. But obviously we haven't been able to do one of those since we had Hannah on the show, I think back in February, right after the Prague ISO meeting. But work is still happening, and we thought it would be a great idea to talk to a couple committee members who have been active over the past few months and kind of get a pulse on what sort of progress has been happening. So could we start off by both of you just telling us a little bit about your perspective on recent, virtual ISO committee meeting work? Maybe start with you, Aaron.
Sure. So 2020 has been a really interesting year in that it's been difficult for me to follow the thread of what's been happening in WG21 because there are so many meetings happening at all points in time. Even though we're not meeting face-to-face, we're meeting virtually, and we have 20 some odd study groups that are meeting virtually along with the 4 working groups. And so I think in the month of November, I counted 6 weekdays that did not have an ISO standards meeting for WG21 on them. Wow. And that makes it a challenge to try and keep up with what's happening. Mostly I've been kind of lurking on things, so I've been paying a close attention to what's been happening in the core working group, which is where I usually sit during the face-to-face meetings. And the most interesting work that I'm seeing there is P1787, is a paper from Davis Herring that is an omnibus paper fixing over 70 core issues in one go. This thing is a gargantuan amount of effort on the part of Davis and the whole core working group to make sure that those wording, the wording changes are all correct. And it's something that will be coming up for polling in November at our plenary meeting. And I'm really excited because it's pretty rare that core gets to close that many issues in one go. It's usually, one issue here, one issue there. And getting through that backlog has been really, it's great that we're taking this opportunity to go through it.
What types of issues are in this paper? I mean, 70 sounds like a lot of things. I'm guessing most of these are pretty minor tweaks?
I would say it's more that we weren't happy with the state of the art in the wording. And so it's fixing a lot of little tiny details. So it's things like fixing definitions, fixing how lookups work, fixing declaration matching, working on modules, parsing. So, I mean, it spans kind of the gamut of everything in C++, but it's mostly just this issue came in and nobody got around to resolving it yet. And Davis just took a whack at it and really knocked it out of the park.
Very cool. Peter, how about you? What's been your take on virtual C++ work over the past few months?
I mean, for me, it's been a really important improvement in the way that we do things in WG21. I have colleagues here in the UK who are really C++ experts, but who have caring responsibilities and can't, go off to the other side of the world for usually over a week to spend 14 plus hour days in meeting rooms. And I think that this, then we know about disabled people who find it difficult to travel by air. And we know that there's a lot of places in the world where, with the best will in the world, you can be an expert in C++, but you won't be able to afford or gain permission to travel to our conferences. So having this virtualized process has the possibility to throw open the doors of WG21 to all sorts of expert contributions that we haven't previously enjoyed. Now, in terms of the work I've been doing, I've mostly been focusing on the Unicode side of things. And back in San Diego, when the Unicode study group was first set up, the expectation was that we'd be spending all of our time on library stuff, libraries for handling text encodings, improvements to the locale system, I/O sort of improvements. And what we discovered a few months ago, well, actually towards the end of 2019, was that one big area where Unicode and text processing has an effect is actually in the specification of the C++ language itself. So we've taken this great big turn around, and all the papers we've been discussing this year, well, almost all, have been to do with sort of improving, the lexing and parsing of C++ source code. And, we've got some quite cool direction coming out of that. We decided to, ban emoji from identifiers. So you can now no longer throw poop. We have fixed multi-character literals. We've solved what happens when you have trailing space followed by a slash at the end of a line. Sorry, a backslash followed by trailing space at the end of the line. See, even I can't get this right. And all these little details are just going to improve the portability and reliability of standard C++ source code, and make it so that the program you get at the end of the compilation process doesn't really care about how you provided the source code to the compiler. So yeah, that's really what we've been focusing on. And who knows, maybe next year we'll get onto that text library stuff we were aiming to do in the first place.
JeanHeyd, you look like you have some thoughts going on.
No, I clutched my chest a little bit there because losing emoji and identifiers kind of made me sad, because I was absolutely, like, some people use it in slides, but I was absolutely the meme lord that put emoji in their code bases. So I was that coworker. But yeah, I mean, it's for the better that we're kind of cleaning this up, and that we're following what is it, UAX
31.
31, UX 30, sorry, 49. UX 31, where it talks about identifiers and how you're supposed to, how you can find them out and stuff like that. It does kind of exclude like one or two languages because of the way that, like, zero with joiner sequences and other stuff are excluded. But I think that would be something that we would go to the Unicode committee and kind of get them to fix it, and then kind of bring that improvement back to C++. So, like, emoji aren't gone forever, but someone has to commit to the work of going all the way to the Unicode committee and convincing them to fix it, and then porting it back to C++. And that's like, maybe it's like a 6 or maybe even a 9-year process. So, I don't know how long the Unicode process is, but yeah. So, I was hurting a little bit for putting flags and emojis and poop and running man and cars of different colors, and even different colored blocks for, like, formatting and stuff. So, I'll live, but I'll still hurts a little bit.
One of the advantages of taking on the sort of Unicode definition of what an identifier looks like, I know we're heading off into the weeds here. One of the big advantages is it makes us have the same set of identifiers available as in a whole bunch of different other programming languages, all of which have also adopted this Unicode specification. So now if somebody goes and works on improving the Unicode standard for this, then all of those different programming languages benefit. So I know that includes, for example, Rust and JavaScript and a couple of other programming languages, Java. When we have a sort of a common standard for how we write identifiers in programming languages across the programming language ecosystem, it makes it easier to write code in principle that interoperates between different languages, or to, like, transliterate useful libraries from one language to another. So I think this is overall a good step, although I really do sympathize with JeanHeyd's disappointment.
Speaking of cross languages, Peter, do you know if SG16 is looking at taking some of that work over to the C committee as well, so that we can both benefit from a kind of a common subset, or is that not necessary? Is that a gargantuan ask?
Well, JeanHeyd's already made the first steps in terms of fixing the peculiarities of white space at the end of lines. I'm sure he's got other stuff up his sleeve.
Jesus. Yeah, so unfortunately put myself a little bit on the hook to kind of take papers between FG16 and the C committee, and I've already published one in the last C mailing, the mixed string literal paper. For not being able to mix two different wide string literals, right? So if you have L and then U, capital U for UTF-3, right? Because mixing those is a very it's very conditionally supported, and most compilers don't even support it anyway. Except I believe for SDCC, the small device C compiler, where they took the first prefix. But even then, the primary maintainer developer works on that, Dr. Kraus, kind of just said, yeah, I'm not sure anyone even uses this feature. We kind of just implemented it because why not? So there's a lot of work going on around trying to make it so that there are things that that like Peter said, that we can have more portability of source code and everything else, and making it so that when you do something on one platform, you don't go to another platform, and then everything explodes. So that's a pretty good thing to kind of move in that direction. Though I am a little bit sad that I not only that I signed up, it's kind of a double whammy because I signed up to do the work, but if the papers get approved, then I'm also the one who has to put them in because I'm the project editor. So I'm signing up for twice the work here. It just doesn't sound like a good idea.
I might add, JeanHeyd, that your blog post on your editing process for the C standard was fascinating, and of course I encourage all of the listeners to go and read that. It really shows you how the sausage is made.
Strong agreement.
Yeah, it's a fun process. Thankfully, I think the C++ with the way that C++ source for making the standard is also in LaTeX, but it's kind of written differently and structured a little bit differently. And I think the reason that the C++ standard has a kind of a better organization of source tree and everything is just kind of where it came from. In the C case, a lot of the it came from an old language called Troff at the time, and that was the way people were writing the standard. And they ported the Troff from that to LaTeX, and then the actual trying to take that LaTeX and kind of slowly move it from being a Troff and LaTeX mix up to being purely LaTeX and getting some of that good organization in has been kind of a interesting journey. I've got this big set of improvements I want to make to the standard, and don't tell anyone from the C committee, but I'm actually think I might introduce stable tags into the C standard, so you can actually instead of remembering section numbers, you actually get to remember environment.limits instead of 5.2. Was it 5.2.2.4.1? I hate that I know that. Yeah, but hopefully these kinds of incremental changes will kind of start slipping in the C standard, and the source will get better, and working with it will get better, and hopefully integrating papers will be faster and better, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm very excited about stable tags, probably to the point that I shouldn't be that excited.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, it's one of those very small things like that. I kind of took it for granted when it showed up in the C++ standard. When they have decal.exper or all those sorts of things. Right? I just kind of thought that's the way people do standards. And then I looked outside the C++ standard and I saw that, oh my God, everybody still references things by section numbers, and the way people keep stability is that they never change section numbers, so they just keep nesting things underneath each other, and that's how you end up with 5.2.2.4.1 and stuff like that. I hope that we can kind of steadily move towards stable tags in the C standard and make it easier to reference stuff. So when you talk to people and things like that, you can kind of have a better lexicon that jogs the memory. I know what end.limits will probably map to, but I have no idea what 6.7.2 is supposed to be. So yeah.
I can't emphasize enough how important these stable tags are even outside the standardization community. When I have a coworker come and ask me, I don't understand why the compiler isn't compiling this the way I expect, then it's so useful to be able to see, well, go and look at, this stable tag and it'll take them directly to, it's initialization. It's always initialization. It'll take them to exactly the paragraph that they need to understand why they're getting some bizarre type of initialization when they're expecting to get value initialization. right? And so yeah, the stable tags are really practical for sort of like everyday compilation debugging, not just for standards nerds like me.
Yeah, definitely.
If we don't mind, I want to rewind a moment back to something, Aaron, I think you said a moment ago. You made mention of a virtual plenary coming up soon. And, we've had, I guess, you said there were online meetings for the ISO committee almost every day of the month. But is this virtual plenary that's coming up soon the first one since the last in-person plenary back in February?
Yeah, so this will be kind of our first opportunity for the whole plenary committee to stamp the work that's been happening in these virtual meetings, and so it's I'm curious to see how it goes. But like Peter, I think this is a great opportunity for the C++ committee to get a lot more people involved who wouldn't otherwise have the ability to get involved, and so I think the accessibility of the meetings is great. But I'm very curious to see if the plenary means that there's going to be more features or less features. I don't know. I don't have a good sense. Is the pace speeding up because more people are able to participate, or is it slowing down because it's a different format and we all are trying to figure out the hiccups?
Right. So how much is expected to happen at the virtual plenary? I think I heard that, there was kind of informal voting happening on various papers where everyone, kind of is agreeing that they approve this paper, but they won't actually vote on it until the next plenary. That's kind of what's going to happen here.
Yeah, that's the usual process in WG21 is the different working groups and the different study groups will take their own polls to say, our group believes this about this paper. And nothing gets officially adopted into the standard until the plenary session when the people who are ISO has blessed for voting basically say this is our position on this feature. And so without holding one of these plenary sessions, we just don't have the ability to actually instruct the project editors, please go make these normative changes.
Okay.
I think one other interesting thing is there's this roadblock in the standardization process now between the evolution working groups, which sort of decide, how we want the standard to evolve, and the wording groups who say, well, this is how we're going to standardize this thing you asked for. What are the actual words that go in the document? And the sort of roadblock is the evolution. If an evolution approves something, it goes to be approved by Plenary before going to the wording group, as I understand it. Well, there has to be a plenary meetings delay, I think is a better way of describing it. I don't think there's actually going to be any straw poll in the plenary meeting, but there's this need to wait to advance stuff, and not having, was it tentatively ready status, I think it's.
Okay.
Yeah. The status is called tentatively ready, and its whole point is to basically give people time to look at this stuff. Before, whenever we voted on stuff in person, right, like that was the bottleneck, right? Like if you were in the room, you saw the vote go up, right? People, pinged each other on IRC or wherever they were and basically asked people to come if they had special interest in certain papers, right? So there was always like this bottleneck where you could always be there. And that bottleneck only happened like 3 or 4 times a year, right? The other kind of portion of this that's kind of changed now with these virtual meetings is that because we're having basically what amount to like little evolution meetings every week, basically, we need a way of kind of queuing up a bunch of work without just kind of like passing it through every week, like rapid fire. So, that's why tentatively ready was introduced. That's why we kind of like wait a little bit, make sure that there's no outstanding objections, kind of make sure that it's all good, and then we kind of move it over to the next stage, so that we kind of we still have checks in place to make sure that somebody can raise an objection or do something or feel like they have the time to read a paper, even if they missed the special 1 hour slot because it was at 2 a.m. their time on their side of the world or something. So that's kind of why the tentatively ready check and that kind of thing is there.
Right.
The Plenary is so and move on to the next pieces of work. So I'm really excited about this Plenary coming up because it gives us, it's the next chance to make some progress on the standard. So it makes a chance to move chunks down the pipeline, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually particularly excited about this virtual plenary because a feature that I actually got approved back in the 20 time frame, the literal suffixes for size T, that was kind of pre-approved to get into CS+23, but not 20 because it was too late in the cycle. So my paper is actually on one of the things on the ballot actually for core. And for being approved this plenary. So, that is one of the first features, I guess, that is going into, C++, the language. So I'm actually pretty excited about that. And that actually helps me fulfill one promise I made to a physicist, Dr. Ryan Halbersmal, who was the original person who put that paper through, but then kind of, had other things to do. So he kind of dropped it in the CS17 timeframe. And so I picked it up. And so carrying this through kind of fulfills his dream, even in the middle of the pandemic, we get to kind of make that work out. So that's pretty cool. And there's a couple of things that are also getting through that are also pretty cool in the library side. But I think overall though there are less motions on this plenary, despite having like a much wider gap of time than you would normally see at I think a plenary meeting, right? So to give an example, like the last in-person plenary like at Prague, and that's kind of a bit exceptional because we were approving CS+20 stuff, but that had like 50 plus motions easily on for things that we were trying to approve. But what's been interesting is that on this plenary, this virtual plenary that we're doing, even though we've had like a much wider gap of time, instead of like meeting like in the summer like we usually, we missed that meeting and we kind of kept going.
It's been like 9 months, right?
Yeah, it's like 9 months of time, but we only have like I think 11 motions, between both library and language, or something around there. But it's definitely not like 40 motions like before. So there's a lot less papers being pushed through, I think. And I think that will kind of change because for a lot of the summer and everything else, we were basically trying to figure out like, are we going to have meetings? Like what's going on? So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that we have 9 months of stuff and we didn't get nearly as much done. I think it's just that we have to spend a lot of time spinning up the process and how does it work virtually and all that kind of stuff. And now that I think that we've got this kind of ball rolling, I think we'll kind of return to a little bit closer to what we were kind of putting before and that kind of stuff. But, I'm not sure if we'll get all the way to having like 40, 50 plus motions a plenary. But yeah.
Right.
I think one of the other reasons for having fewer motions is kind of people have been taking this as an opportunity to work on like big ticket items. So Aaron was already talking earlier about this massive single paper that makes huge improvements to the core language wording. I know that in the library side, they've got the networking paper that's had an awful lot of attention. I mean, dozens of hours of library working group time, and library evolution has been spending a huge amount of time on executors. And the thing about executors, right, is like they've got dozens of papers on that, but eventually when that comes to a straw poll and plenary, it'll be one motion, add executors, right? And so I think in some ways the more distributed meetings, the more frequent meetings, the more frequent paper mailings as well, let's not forget that, have meant that it's been possible to make more focused progress on some of those really big ticket C++23 items. So I wouldn't take the small number of straw polls as being an indication that, we're suffered a pipeline stall, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess you kind of touched on this, and maybe we'll know a lot more after this November plenary, but one thing I'm thinking about, and I'm sure listeners are curious about, is how much might this affect C++23? I mean, hopefully the world goes back to normal and you can start having normal face-to-face meetings again. But do we feel like, significant work is being done and C++23 should still be a significant release, or do we think it might be smaller because of the COVID pandemic?
I honestly don't know. It's so early in the process to really be able to predict. But I think the good thing is I feel like we've really done a good job of working a lot of those kinks out of our process stuff, and so now we can start seeing what our more realistic pace is like, and whether that impacts things or not. But I do know that, for instance, one big ticket item that is still being heavily worked on for C++23 is contracts. That was slated to be in C++20, but it didn't gain enough consensus, and so it didn't make it there. And the contract study group has been meeting and trying to continue to make progress on contracts for C++23. Now, whether they'll hit that target or not, it's still way too early to say, but it halted all big feature work to go try and clean up bugs in every corner.
In terms of the schedule, I know that Herb is Herb Sutter, the chairman of WG21, is absolutely committed to making sure there's going to be a C++23 standard, no matter what the content is. The train model we have where, if your feature misses the train, well, there'll be another one along in 3 years. And I think that's a good approach to take, because it means that if a paper is not ready or a feature is not ready, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to hold our things up. And, there's already enough things going to be in C++23 to make it a really worthwhile language upgrade.
Right. Do you want to talk a little bit more about specific papers or study group work that either of you have been working on? Aaron?
I've got one I'd like to make a plug for.
Sure.
WG21 is spinning up a brand new study group that I'm going to be the chair of, which is focusing on C and C++ compatibility. And so the idea is this is going to be a joint study group where C committee members are in it and C++ committee members are in it at the same time. And they can talk to one another. And I think this is actually going to make a big improvement in terms of the intersection between C and C++ to try and ensure that the common parts stay common instead of diverging, and to also ensure that as we're adding new parts, we keep in mind how they're going to impact the committee. And so I personally am really excited about this, because this is an area that I think is really important. It's very easy for the C committee to completely ignore the C++ committee and vice versa. And that has serious economic impact, because there's 100% of C++ programmers, whether they know it or not, rely on C compatibility, because our operating systems give their platform SDKs as C headers. And we all just kind of hope this all works out great. And we want to make sure that that continues to work out great in the future and work out better in the future. So I think that's going to be a really important study group for both committees.
Very cool. What study group number is that? What are you up to? 20-something?
SG22, which is going to drive me nuts because the parent committee is SC22. So,
and SG21 has already been driving Aaron and me nuts because it sounds too much like WG21. So you can't really win with the numbers. Maybe we should start using more impenetrable acronyms. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking stable names.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy that the C and C++ compatibility group is happening, because a lot of my papers were probably going to end up being C and C++ compatibility papers. So rather than kind of just haplessly flailing between two committees and hoping that things stay synchronized, I think having that liaison group will make things a lot better for features that will appear in both like Hack and Bad and maybe type of and upcoming paper that I might have to make U8 literals work with unsigned cars so that there's less breakage and from people going from C++17 to 20 and from C++ in general to C where car T doesn't exist. at the moment. So yeah, that's going to be helpful for me, definitely.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think the study group really was born out of the fact that when we were working on attributes in C, that was a feature that I was working on and bringing over from C++, and it became readily apparent that we need better collaboration just because of the amount of confusion between both committees as to how, what syntactic constructs these apply to, and I didn't realize that the language worked this way, and those sort of comments were a bit of a surprise, and the drive, I guess, to improve things when you see a little tiny corner case where you're like, I think we could make this a little bit better. And it's true, you could make it better, but then it would be completely incompatible with something in C++. And this code lives in a header file that might be compiled by either a C compiler or a C++ compiler. Those sorts of problems we have to be really resistant to, even though it might be that we could actually improve something that one committee hadn't noticed.
Peter, do you have something you wanted to add?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to have a big shout out to all the tiny little papers that aren't really making any big, headline improvements to the standard, but are just sort of adding little tiny convenience features here and fixing minor bugs over there, because although, we won't spend a lot of time talking about them, on Foronics or Reddit or whatever, those are really the lifeblood of the standard that makes it worth doing. And of course, I have a big shout out to a nice placeholder with no name, P2169 from Corentin Jabber and Michael Park, which is just going to let you, if you want a variable and you don't want to think of a name for it, call it underscore. And I'm really excited about this paper. This will make my life a lot easier, even though it's not exciting like executors. It's the kind of thing that really makes me want to be involved in the committee to see these kind of everyday improvements going in.
The quality of life stuff, definitely.
Yeah,
is absolutely worth it. It's small stuff, but it just makes like the everyday coding so much better. And those are they seem like small papers, but they're definitely big wins, kind of like over time and across the board, definitely.
Oh, sure. Like the fewer places I have to ever think about writing the word type name or template. I love those papers, even though they come across as seeming kind of small and insignificant. They save me time on a day-to-day basis because it makes the language more comprehensible to me.
Yeah, definitely. We're getting a little bit low on time, but is there any other questions or papers anyone wants to bring up? JeanHeyd, do you have any questions you might want to ask?
Yeah. So, Peter, so you kind of became the assistant chair of G16. So, like, you've been kind of at it for a little bit. Like, how was it like being like an assistant chair and like helping a group, like, and all that kind of stuff? Like, how does that like feel? What does that process look like to you? Does it involve a lot of emails? Like, what is the workload of being an assistant chair kind of like,
Well, like a lot of the roles within WG21, it's what you make of it, right? And I'm just sort of feeling my way into seeing how I and Tom Honeman, who's the chair of the study group, can best share the work that needs to be done between us. I think that probably my main contribution is going to be watching little hand symbols appear in our Zoom chat for the next few meetings and making sure people get their turn to speak, which is not a small thing to make sure happens. Some people in our study group are more reticent about interrupting than others are, and certainly when you've got a number of people in the study group, someone's got to take notes, someone's got to chair the meeting, probably have a paper author presenting. Like, having a couple more people to help the chair out with making sure that the meeting runs smoothly and everybody gets their opinion to be heard and we get a good consensus at the end of it. I think that many of our study groups should look at getting more people involved in running them and running them smoothly. But I mean, I've only been doing this for a couple of weeks, so get back to me in a year's time and I'll give you a better answer.
See, that's the easy hook for another appearance on this podcast,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Aaron, I mean, so I don't think there's been any meetings of the liaison group. I don't think it's like fully, it hasn't fully spun up yet, I don't think, right?
Yeah, correct. I'm hoping that maybe we'll have our first meeting this year still, but given that it's starting to turn into the holiday season, we might start meeting early next year. But the hope is early, soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So the weight of responsibility and the piles of work hasn't shown up quite yet.
Yeah, it's mostly been piles of work regards to thinking about how to ensure that this is a more seamless and smooth process for both committees. Because for reference, for people who don't know, the C++ committee is usually, when we were meeting face-to-face, was between 200 and 300 people would show up to these meetings quite frequently. And it's split off across, a dozen or so rooms that are all meeting in parallel. And by contrast, the C committee is about 15 to 20 people, and we meet in plenary at all points in time. And so the culture and the expectations of how work progresses through the committee is very different between these two. And so I want to make sure that the study group considers very strongly things like how do you judge whether you have quorum? Can we have quorum if we have only C++ committee members who are in the meeting? How do you judge consensus if everybody on the C committee votes yes and everybody on the C++ committee votes no, but there's only 3 people from the C committee and there's 30 from the C++ committee? Yeah. So it's spending a lot of time thinking about those sort of things to make sure that the study group it works appropriately with both committees.
What sort of pace does the C committee work on? I mean, you say it's much, much smaller, only like 15 people. But are they meeting like 3 times a year? How many papers are they pushing through compared to the C++ committee?
So we've been working on the next edition of C, which we just learned, thanks to ISO, will be C23. Okay. And so our usual pace is, every 10 years or so we put out a new feature release. And our last release was C17. So this is a little bit shorter of a time frame. And C17 was just a bug fix release, so this was really our first chance to kind of open up and start doing new feature work. Mm-hmm. And so the pace has been breakneck by comparison to the C17 pace. Okay. So we run out of time slots to discuss our papers in the C committee meetings now. So we meet virtually, just like the C++ committee does, but we'll meet for a week at a time. And doing 4 hours a day, every day for a week. So that way we don't have 8-hour-long Zoom meetings for a week, which would be awful. But they realized that that wasn't enough time to get to all the papers. So we doubled the number of meetings we have in order to get the same amount of work done. So the pace has been surprisingly fast, but there've been a lot of new features that are coming down the pipeline, and so I think C23 is actually going to be a really interesting addition for C, where it's starting to get some great new features that we really haven't seen since 2011. So,
wow. Okay, well, it has been great having you both on the show today. Before I let you go, Aaron, where can people find you online?
So I'm on Twitter as Aaron Ballman. It's a private account just because I don't want people to have to necessarily contend with everything that I think. And so, but feel free to send me a follower request and I'm happy to follow you back too.
Okay. And Peter, how about you?
Well, I'm also on Twitter, Peter TB Brett. Lots of local politics on there, not so much C++, but if you want to chat C++, I also hang out on the #include CPP Discord server.
Okay. And JeanHeyd, I'm so glad you're able to join us as a guest host today. Where can people find you online these days?
So at the moment, I when I made my video, I kind of ejected from all social media, so I didn't have anywhere that anyone could find me. But you can still reach me personally at phd@gmail.com. If you have a comment about the C standard, you can actually reach me in the more official capacity at wg14@soasis.org. You can also find me on the #include CVP Discord. I'm still kind of like rolling myself back in like Twitter and Discord and Reddit and stuff slowly. But yeah, those are all the places that you can kind of find me and interact with me. Sorry, it's email is boring to interact with somebody, but hopefully I'll get a Twitter and stuff soon and be able to chat it up with people more and all that other fun stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming on the show today. It was great having you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.